The alarms screamed across every ship in the Galactic Confederation fleet. Admiral Zara Chen of the human vessel New Horizons stared at her screens in disbelief. The readings could not be right. Nothing that large should be able to move that fast. Through space. "Confirm the readings," she ordered her communications officer. Lieutenant Park's face went pale as he checked his instruments again. "Confirmed, Admiral. Draconian warship, Void Talon class. It just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our solar system." The bridge fell silent. Every person there knew what this meant. The Draconians were the most feared military force in the known galaxy. For over 1,000 years, they had conquered world after world. No species had ever successfully fought them off. Their ships were not just machines of war. They were living creatures, grown rather than built, with armor that could heal itself and weapons that fed on the life force of their enemies. Admiral Chen had seen the reports from other worlds. The Draconians would arrive, demand total surrender, and then either enslave the population or destroy them completely. There was never a third option. "How long until they reach Earth?" she asked. "At their current speed, 72 hours, Park replied. Chen nodded grimly. The human fleet was scattered across the solar system on routine patrols. They had 12 ships total, all of them small research vessels or cargo haulers that had been hastily fitted with basic weapons. Against a Draconian warship, they would last about as long as paper boats in a hurricane. "Open a channel to Earth Command," she ordered. The face of General Martinez appeared on the main screen. His expression was calm, but Chen could see the worry in his eyes. "We've detected the Draconian ship as well," Martinez said before Chen could speak. "All fleet commanders are to return to Earth immediately for emergency briefing." "Sir, with respect, there's no point," Chen said. "We can't fight them. The Void. Talon alone could destroy our entire fleet and still have enough firepower left to turn Earth into dust." Martinez was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, just get back here. We have a plan." Chen wanted to ask what kind of plan could possibly work against the Draconians, but the channel closed before she could speak. She turned to her crew. "You heard the general. Set course for Earth, maximum speed." As the New Horizon and the other human ships raced toward their homeworld, the Void Talon continued its slow, menacing approach. The ship was a nightmare made real, over 5 kilometers long, shaped like a massive dragon with wings spread wide. Its bioarmor pulsed with a sickly green light, and weapon ports along its sides glowed like angry eyes. On the bridge of the Void Talon, Admiral Kethvar studied the sensor readings with satisfaction. This would be another easy conquest. The humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their ships were primitive, their weapons laughable. He had conquered civilizations far more advanced than this one. Kethvar was a typical Draconian, 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that were harder than titanium, with yellow eyes that could see in complete darkness. His claws could tear through steel, and his bite could inject venom that would kill most creatures in seconds. Like all of his kind, he had been bred for war. "Communications officer," he commanded in the harsh Draconian tongue. "Prepare the standard ultimatum message." "Yes, Admiral," the officer replied. "Shall I broadcast on all frequencies?" "Yes. Make sure every human on that pathetic little world hears it." The message went out across the solar system, reaching Earth and every human ship. The translation was perfect. The Draconians had been conquering worlds long enough to have collected the languages of thousands of species. "Attention, humans of the third planet. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Draconian Empire. Your world is now under our control. You have 72 hours to surrender completely and unconditionally. All weapons must be destroyed. All military forces must stand down. Your leaders must present themselves to us for judgment. If you comply, some of you may be allowed to. Live as slaves. If you resist, your entire species will be exterminated. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. You have 72 hours. The message repeated every hour as the Void Talon moved closer to Earth. Other ships of the Galactic Confederation watched from a safe distance, their crews preparing to witness another tragedy. Some recorded messages of sympathy to send to whoever might find Earth's ruins in the future. On Earth, the reaction was not what anyone expected. In the Emergency Command Center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Martinez stood before a room full of world leaders, military commanders, and scientists. The mood should have been one of panic and despair. Instead, there was an odd sense of calm determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez began, "we all heard the message. We have 68 hours remaining. I want to review our response plan. One more time." Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of Earth's Xenobiology Department, stood up. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. "The psychological profiles we've developed on Draconian behavior patterns show several interesting weaknesses," she said. "They expect fear, resistance, or immediate surrender. They have never encountered a species that responds with curiosity and hospitality." Admiral Chen, who had arrived just hours before, shook her head. "With all due respect, Doctor, you're talking about being nice to creatures that have destroyed entire civilizations. They're not going to be impressed by a welcome party." Dr. Kim smiled. "Admiral, you're thinking like a military officer. The Draconians are the ultimate military species. Everything they do is based on dominance, submission, and force. What happens when they encounter something they can't categorize? What happens when their entire worldview is challenged?" General Martinez stepped forward. "Dr. Kim's team has been studying every available record of Draconian conquests. In every single case, they followed the same pattern: arrive, threaten, fight, or accept surrender, establish control. They have never faced a species that simply refuses to play by those rules." "And what exactly are you suggesting we do?" asked President Walsh. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing the Draconian ship. "We invite them to dinner." The room erupted in arguments, but Martinez raised his hand for silence. "The plan is already in motion. All military forces are standing down. All weapon systems are being powered down. When the Draconians arrive, they will find no resistance. No cowering population and no military targets. Instead, they will find humans doing what humans do best: being curious about new neighbors." Admiral Chen stared at the general. "Sir, this is suicide." "No, Admiral," Martinez replied. "This is something the Draconians have never seen before. And according to Dr. Kim's research, when Draconians encounter something truly unknown, they become confused and hesitant. We're going to give them the biggest unknown of their lives." As the hours passed, a strange transformation took place across Earth. Instead of panic and preparation for war, there was an odd sense of excitement. News broadcasts showed people in major cities putting up welcome banners. Children drew pictures of dragons. Restaurants began preparing special menus for visitors with different dietary needs. The human fleet took positions around Earth, but their weapons remained powered down. Admiral Chen received orders that made her question the sanity of her commanders. When the Draconians arrived, she was to offer them safe passage to Earth and ask if they needed anything for their journey. On the Void Talon, Admiral Kethvar was beginning to feel unsettled. He had expected the humans to respond with desperate military movements, attempts to flee the planet, or messages begging for mercy. Instead, the human ships were just sitting there, doing nothing. No weapons were pointed at his ship. No defensive formations were being created. "Communications officer," he ordered, "scan all human transmissions. What are they saying to each other?" The officer worked for several minutes, then looked up with confusion. "Admiral, the transmissions are strange. They appear to be discussing food preparation, cultural protocols for greeting visitors, and questions about our biology and customs. Kethvar's yellow eyes narrowed. What kind of questions? They want to know if we prefer our food heated or cooled, what kind of atmosphere we breathe, whether we have any dietary restrictions, and if we would be interested in cultural exchange programs. The Admiral stared at his communications officer. In 1,000 years of conquest, no species had ever asked the Draconians about dietary restrictions. Sir, the navigation officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it on the main screen, Kethvar ordered. Admiral Chen's face appeared before him. She was smiling politely as if she were greeting a neighbor rather than a conquering army. Greetings, Admiral Kethvar, she said. I'm Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We've received your message and wanted to welcome you to our solar system. If you need anything for your ships or crew during your visit, please let us know. We have medical facilities, fuel supplies, and food available if needed. We're very excited to meet you. Kethvar stared at the screen in complete bewilderment. The human female was treating him like a tourist rather than a conqueror. This had never happened before. Ever! Human, he growled. You were given an ultimatum. Surrender or die. Those are your only options. Admiral Chen's smile never wavered. We understand, Admiral. We'd like to discuss that with you in person, if possible. Our leaders are very interested in learning about your culture and finding a solution that works for everyone. Would you prefer to meet on Earth, or would you like us to come to your ship? We can prepare suitable accommodation either way. The Draconian Admiral found himself speechless. This human was discussing his ultimatum like it was a business proposal. She was offering him accommodation. She was talking about solutions that worked for everyone. Kethvar started, then stopped. The bridge crew was staring at him, waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? How do you conquer a species that won't acknowledge they're being conquered? We will be in orbit of your planet in 18 hours, he finally managed to say. Prepare for our arrival. Wonderful, Admiral Chen replied. We'll have everything ready. Will you be bringing a large delegation? We want to make sure we have enough space and refreshments for everyone. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew exchanged confused glances. In all their years of service, they had never seen their admiral look so puzzled. Sir, the communications officer said hesitantly, how should we proceed? Kethvar had no idea. The humans were acting like they were planning a celebration rather than facing annihilation. Every instinct told him this was some kind of trap, but his sensors showed no hidden weapons, no secret defenses. The humans genuinely seemed to be preparing to welcome the Draconians as guests. As the Void Talon moved closer to Earth, Admiral Kethvar began to wonder if perhaps the humans were too primitive to understand what was happening to them. But the more he studied their transmissions, the more he realized these creatures were far from primitive. They were curious, organized, and seemingly unafraid. They were also doing something no species in the galaxy had ever done before. They were treating the most feared military force in known space like honored guests, and Kethvar had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The Void Talon settled into orbit around Earth like a massive storm cloud blocking out the sun. From the surface, the ship looked like a dark moon that had appeared overnight. Its bioluminescent armor pulsed with an eerie green glow that could be seen even in daylight. Admiral Kethvar stood in the ship's main deployment bay watching his warriors prepare for landing. Each Draconian soldier was a perfect killing machine, 8 feet of muscle, scales, and deadly weapons. Their armor was grown from the same biomaterial as the ship itself, capable of healing minor damage and enhancing their already formidable strength. Commander Vex, his second-in-command, approached with the mission briefing. Admiral, the landing parties are ready. We have selected 12 major population centers for simultaneous assault. Standard protocol. Secure the government buildings, neutralize military leadership, and establish control points. Kethvar nodded, but something felt wrong. The humans below were not behaving like any species he had conquered before. Their cities showed no signs of evacuation or military buildup. Instead, his sensors detected large gatherings of civilians in open areas, almost like they were preparing for festivals. "Commander," he said slowly, "have our scouts reported any resistance? Preparations? None, Admiral. No defensive positions, no weapon emplacements, no military formations. The humans appear to be waiting." "Waiting for what?" Vex looked confused. "Unknown, sir. They seem to be setting up large outdoor areas with tables and what appears to be food preparation stations." Kethvar's yellow eyes narrowed. Food preparation. Were the humans planning to poison his troops? But that made no sense. Draconian biology was immune to most toxins that affected other species. "Proceed with the landings," he ordered, "but maintain full combat readiness. This could be some sort of trap." The dropships launched from the void talon like angry wasps leaving a hive. Each one carried 20 Draconian warriors armed with energy weapons that could level buildings. They descended toward Earth's major cities, ready for battle. In New York City, Commander Vex's dropship touched down in Central Park. The massive ship's landing thrusters burned the grass and sent clouds of steam into the air. As the boarding ramp lowered, Vex and his warriors emerged ready for immediate combat. Instead, they found themselves facing a crowd of humans holding signs that read, "Welcome to Earth," in 17 different languages, including what appeared to be an attempt at written Draconian. Vex stopped so suddenly that the warrior behind him nearly ran into his back. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't running in terror or attacking in desperation. They were applauding. A small human female with gray hair stepped forward. She was wearing what appeared to be formal diplomatic clothing and carrying a bouquet of flowers. "Commander Vex, I presume," she said in perfect Draconian. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's Director of Xenobiological Relations. We're so honored to meet you." Vex stared down at her. This tiny creature barely reached his chest, and she was addressing him like he was an invited guest rather than a conquering warrior. She spoke his language fluently, which should have been impossible since this was first contact between their species. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. "How do you speak our language?" Dr. Kim smiled pleasantly. "We've been monitoring your transmissions and studying your language patterns. We're very quick learners. Would you like to come with me? We've prepared a welcome ceremony and a cultural exchange presentation. We're very curious about your species and your journey here." Behind her, more humans stepped forward. Some were carrying recording devices. Others had clipboards with what looked like interview questions. A few children held up drawings of dragons with friendly faces. Vex looked around at his warriors. They were all staring at the humans with the same confused expression he felt on his own face. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. "We are not here for ceremonies," he said firmly. "We are here to accept your surrender and establish Draconian control over this planet." "Oh, we understand," Dr. Kim replied cheerfully. "But surely we can discuss the details over lunch. We've prepared a variety of foods that should be compatible with your dietary needs. We weren't sure what you preferred, so we made several options." She gestured toward the edge of the park, where humans had set up long tables covered with food. The smell was actually quite appealing. Meat dishes that reminded Vex of home. "You prepared food for us?" he asked. "Of course. You've traveled such a long way. You must be tired and hungry. Please come and sit. We have so many questions about your culture and your technology." Vex found himself being gently but persistently guided toward the tables. His warriors followed, their weapons still ready but their expressions growing more confused by the moment. This was definitely not standard conquest protocol. Similar scenes were playing out in cities around the world. In London, Commander Thok found himself being offered tea and asked about the weather on his home planet. In Tokyo, Commander Zeth was surrounded by scientists eager to learn about bioship technology. In Cairo, Commander Rask was being shown ancient Egyptian pyramids by enthusiastic archaeologists who wanted to compare construction techniques. Nowhere were the Draconians meeting the resistance they expected. Instead, they were being treated like visiting professors or distinguished guests. The humans seemed genuinely excited to meet them and incredibly interested in learning about Draconian society. Back on the Void Talon, Admiral Kethvar was receiving increasingly confused reports from his ground commanders. "Sir," came Vex's voice over the communication system, "the humans they're asking about our mating rituals." "They're what?" "They want to know about our family structures, our art, our music. They've prepared some kind of cultural presentation for us. They're treating this like a diplomatic first contact rather than a conquest." Kethvar's claws scraped against the metal railing he was gripping. "Commander, remind them that we are there to accept their surrender, not to participate in cultural exchange." "I've tried, sir. They keep saying we can discuss political arrangements after we've gotten to know each other better. They want to understand our needs and find solutions that work for everyone." "Solutions that work for everyone?" Kethvar repeated. "We don't need solutions, we need submission." "Yes, sir. But they keep asking questions like, what would make you happy? And how can we be good neighbors? They're treating this like we're moving in next door instead of conquering them." Similar reports came in from all the landing sites. The humans were not resisting, but they also weren't surrendering in any way the Draconians understood. Instead, they were doing something unprecedented. They were trying to make friends. In New York, Dr. Kim was leading Commander Vex on a tour of the city while asking him detailed questions about Draconian history and technology. She seemed particularly interested in how their bioships worked and whether Draconian society had ever encountered peaceful solutions to territorial disputes. "Your ships are absolutely fascinating," she said as they walked through Times Square, followed by Vex's confused warriors and a growing crowd of curious humans. "The biological integration of technology and living tissue, it's like nothing we've ever seen. How did your species develop such techniques?" Vex found himself actually answering her questions. It was impossible not to. She was so genuinely interested and asked such intelligent follow-up questions. Before he realized it, he was explaining the history of Draconian biotechnology and the cultural significance of their living ships. "Remarkable," Dr. Kim said, "and your military campaigns, they must require incredible coordination between the biological and technological systems. How do you maintain such complex operations across vast distances?" "It requires perfect harmony between the ship mind and the crew," Vex replied, then stopped abruptly. Why was he explaining military secrets to these creatures? But Dr. Kim's next question made him forget his concerns. "Ship mind? Your vessels are sentient?" Oh my, that raises fascinating questions about the relationship between artificial intelligence and biological consciousness. Do you communicate with your ships telepathically, or is there some other form of interface? For the first time in decades, Commander Vex found himself thinking about his ship not as a weapon of war, but as the complex, living entity it actually was. The human's questions were making him see familiar things in new ways. Similar conversations were happening all over Earth. Human scientists, artists, philosophers, and even children were engaging the Draconian warriors in discussions about everything from military strategy to what it was like to live among the stars. The Draconians found themselves talking about their families, their hopes, their fears, and their dreams. It was profoundly disturbing. By the end of the first day, Admiral Kethvar was facing a crisis unlike anything in Draconian military history. His troops were not establishing control over the human population. Instead, they were sitting in parks and cafes answering questions. about their personal lives and eating human food. "Status report," he demanded from Commander Vex. "Sir, the humans continue to be cooperative. They've shown us their art, their music, their literature. They've shared their scientific discoveries and asked for our input on various projects. They seem to think we're here for some kind of extended cultural exchange program. Have you reminded them that we are conquerors, not tourists?" "Yes, sir. They keep saying things like, 'We'll work out the political details later,' and 'First we want to get to know you as people.' They've invited us to stay in their homes, sir." Kethvar felt a headache forming behind his eyes. "Stay in their homes?" "They say their guest rooms are comfortable and they want to make sure we're properly accommodated during our visit. They're treating us like honored guests, not conquering forces." The Admiral closed his eyes and tried to think. In 1,000 years of Draconian expansion, no species had ever responded this way. They were supposed to either fight or surrender, not invite the invasion force over for dinner and ask about their hobbies. What was he supposed to do with an enemy that refused to be an enemy? 3 weeks had passed since the Draconian landing, and Admiral Kethvar was experiencing something he had never felt before: complete bewilderment. He stood in his private quarters aboard the Void Talon, staring at reports that made no sense. According to everything he knew about conquest and military occupation, his warriors were not establishing control over Earth. Instead, they were learning to play human games, attending human schools as guest speakers, and participating in something called cultural exchange programs. Commander Vex had sent him a photo of himself wearing a human hat called a baseball cap, while standing next to something called a hot dog vendor. The communication system chimed, and Kethvar answered with growing dread. "Admiral," came the voice of Commander Thack from London. "I need to request an extension of shore leave for my unit." "Shore leave!" Kethvar's voice rose dangerously. "Commander, you are not on vacation. You are supposed to be establishing military control over a conquered territory." "Yes, sir, but the humans have invited us to something called a university symposium where we'll be discussing the evolution of military technology across different species. They're very interested in our perspectives on strategic development. And frankly, sir, their questions have made me think about our own methods in ways I never considered before." Kethvar felt his eye begin to twitch. "Commander, we do not attend symposiums with conquered species. We dominate them. I understand, sir, but these humans, they're not acting conquered. They keep treating us like colleagues and friends. Yesterday, a group of their children made me a birthday cake. Apparently, they calculated my age in Earth years and decided I needed a celebration. I didn't have the heart to tell them that Draconians don't celebrate birthdays." "Did you eat the cake?" Kethvar asked, though he wasn't sure why. "Well, yes, sir. It was quite good, actually. Chocolate, they called it. I've never tasted anything like it." Kethvar closed his eyes and counted to 10 in the ancient Draconian manner. When he opened them, his communications board was lighting up with more incoming calls from his other commanders. Commander Zeth's report from Tokyo was equally disturbing. "Sir, the humans here have developed what they call manga, artistic representations of stories. They've created several featuring Draconian characters, but instead of depicting us as fearsome conquerors, they've drawn us as heroes working alongside humans to solve problems and protect the innocent. It's quite flattering, actually." "Flattering," Kethvar repeated weakly. "Yes, sir. They've made us look very noble and heroic. One story has me saving a human child from a burning building using my natural strength and flame resistance. Another shows Commander Vex helping human scientists develop new medical technologies using Draconian biological knowledge." Kethvar wanted to point out that Draconians were supposed to be feared, not portrayed as heroes in human comic books, but he was beginning to lose the will to argue. The worst report came from Commander Rask in Cairo. "Admiral, I've been asked to serve as best man at a human wedding." "A what?" Apparently, two humans are getting married. It's a pair bonding ceremony, and they've asked me to stand with them as an honored friend. They said I helped them understand the importance of commitment and loyalty through our discussions about Draconian mating bonds. They want me to give a speech about the meaning of partnership. Kethvar stared at the communication device in complete silence. His military commanders were attending weddings, eating birthday cake, and posing for comic books. This was not conquest. This was not even a dignified surrender. This was something entirely new and terrifying. The humans had somehow turned his invasion into a neighborhood welcome party. Down on Earth, the transformation was even more remarkable. Dr. Sarah Kim sat in her office, reviewing reports from around the world. The results of humanity's unconventional response to the Draconian invasion were beyond her wildest hopes. In every city where the Draconians had landed, the same pattern had emerged. The initial confusion and awkwardness had given way to genuine relationships. Human scientists were collaborating with Draconian engineers to solve complex problems. Human artists were working with Draconian craftsmen to create new forms of expression. Human teachers were learning about Draconian history, while Draconian warriors were discovering human philosophy. Most remarkably, the Draconians themselves were changing. Commander Vex had started carrying around a small notebook where he wrote down interesting human sayings and customs. He had learned to appreciate human humor and had even attempted to tell a few jokes himself, though his delivery needed work. Yesterday, he had spent 3 hours helping a group of human children build a treehouse, using his natural strength to lift heavy wooden beams while patiently explaining Draconian construction techniques. Commander Thack had become fascinated with human literature and was working his way through what he called the classics. He had started with Shakespeare and was currently reading Tolkien, which he found particularly interesting since the humans had created fictional dragons long before meeting real ones. He had given several lectures at Oxford University about the differences between human imagination and Draconian reality. Commander Zeth had discovered human music and was learning to play something called a piano. His large claws made it challenging, but human musicians had helped him develop techniques that worked with his physiology. He was currently working on a piece that combined traditional Draconian harmonics with human classical structures. But perhaps the most significant change was happening to Admiral Kethvar himself, though he didn't realize it yet. Dr. Kim had been carefully monitoring the communications from the Draconian ship. What she heard was the sound of a military commander slowly losing his certainty about everything he had believed about conquest, power, and the nature of strength itself. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had made the Draconians question not just their mission, but their entire worldview. That afternoon, Dr. Kim received an unexpected message. Admiral Kethvar was requesting a personal meeting. Not a formal surrender ceremony or a negotiation session, but a private conversation. They met in Central Park, near where Commander Vex had first landed. Kethvar arrived alone, without his usual complement of guards. He looked tired and confused, like someone who had been trying to solve an impossible puzzle for weeks. "Dr. Kim," he said as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake, "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Of course, Admiral. What are you doing to us?" Dr. Kim tilted her head thoughtfully. "I'm not sure I understand the question." "My warriors came here to conquer your world," Kethvar said slowly. "They were trained from birth to be perfect soldiers. They have defeated every enemy they've ever faced. They are instruments of the Draconian Empire's will. Yes? And now they're learning to bake bread and attending poetry readings and asking me if they can adopt human pets." His voice rose slightly. "Commander Vex sent me a photo of himself wearing human clothing and something called sunglasses while standing in front of your Statue of Liberty. He looked happy." Dr. Kim smiled gently. "Is that bad?" "I don't know," Kethvar exploded. In 1,000 years of conquest, we have never encountered anything like this. Species either fight us or they submit to us. They don't invite us to their birthday parties and ask us about our feelings and teach us to dance. You've learned to dance? Cathvar looked embarrassed. Commander Rask taught me something called a waltz yesterday. He said it was important for diplomatic relations. Dr. Kim nodded seriously. It is. Dancing is a form of communication that transcends language barriers. That's what he said. Cathvar was quiet for a moment. Dr. Kim, my empire sent me here to add your world to our territory. We have done this successfully for 1,000 years. We know how to fight armies, how to break the will of populations, how to establish control over resistant governments. But we don't know how to conquer a species that treats us like family. Maybe, Dr. Kim suggested gently. Conquest isn't what you really want. Cathvar stared at her. What do you mean? Well, think about it. You've spent your entire life taking things from other species, their freedom, their resources, their worlds. But when was the last time someone gave you something just because they wanted to make you happy? The Admiral was quiet for a long time. Never, he said finally. Your warriors have been living among us for 3 weeks now, Dr. Kim continued. They've experienced kindness, friendship, curiosity, and acceptance. They've been treated as individuals rather than just soldiers. They've discovered parts of themselves they never knew existed. Don't you think that might be more valuable than another conquered world? Cathvar looked out over the lake, where a group of human children were feeding ducks, while Commander Vex watched them with what could only be described as paternal affection. What happens to my empire? He asked quietly. What if it became something better? Dr. Kim replied. What if instead of conquering worlds, you were exploring them? What if instead of taking from other species, you were sharing with them? What if the Draconian Empire became known not for its military might, but for its wisdom and friendship? The Admiral was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was uncertain. I would need to contact my superiors. This is not a decision I can make alone. Dr. Kim nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready. As they sat together watching the sunset over Central Park, neither of them noticed the small group of Draconian warriors and human children playing together nearby, or the way Commander Vex was carefully helping a little girl reach the monkey. Bars while her friends cheered him on. The galaxy's most feared military force was discovering something more powerful than conquest, the simple joy of making friends. Admiral Cathvar stood in the communication chamber of the Void Talon, staring at the holographic image of Supreme Commander Drakthul, leader of the Draconian Empire. The Supreme Commander's massive form filled the display, his ancient scales, bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, his yellow eyes burning with the cold fire that had intimidated countless species across the galaxy. Admiral Cathvar. Drakthul's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Explain to me why your conquest of the human world has taken over 2 months. Your last report spoke of cultural complications and unexpected resistance patterns. What does this mean? Cathvar took a deep breath. How could he explain what had happened on Earth? How could he make the Supreme Commander understand that his entire worldview had been turned upside down by creatures who offered friendship instead of submission? Supreme Commander, he began carefully, the humans are different from any species we have encountered before. Different how? Do they possess superior weapons? Advanced defensive technologies? No, sir. They possess something far more dangerous. Drakthul's eyes narrowed. Explain. They have weaponized kindness, sir. The silence that followed was so complete that Cathvar could hear his own heartbeat. When Drakthul finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. Admiral, did you just tell me that the mighty Draconian Empire has been stopped by kindness? Yes, sir. They refuse to be conquered because they refuse to see us as conquerors. Instead, they treat us as guests, friends, and partners. They ask about our families, our history, our dreams. They share their food, their knowledge, their lives with us. They have made us care about their well-being. Care about their well-being? Drakthul repeated, his voice rising. Admiral, you are there to establish dominance, not to make friends. I understand, sir, but no buts, Admiral. You will complete your mission immediately. Destroy their major cities if necessary, but bring that world under our control. Kethavar closed his eyes. I cannot do that, Supreme Commander. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. In the entire history of the Draconian Empire, no admiral had ever refused a direct order from the Supreme Commander. What did you say? Drakthul's voice was deadly quiet. I said, I cannot do that, sir. The humans have done nothing to deserve destruction. They have welcomed us, helped us, shown us parts of ourselves we never knew existed. They have children, families, dreams, just like we do. I will not be responsible for their annihilation. Drakthul's roar of rage shook the communication chamber. Admiral Kethavar, you are relieved of command. Return to the homeworld immediately for court-martial. No, sir, Kethavar said quietly. I hereby resign my commission in the Draconian Empire and request political asylum on Earth. The holographic image flickered as Drakthul struggled to process what he had just heard. You're defecting? I prefer to think of it as choosing a better life, sir. Before Drakthul could respond, other voices joined the conversation. One by one, Kethavar's senior officers appeared on smaller displays around the main communication chamber. Commander Vex reporting, sir, came the first voice. I also resign my commission and request asylum on Earth. Commander Thak, requesting asylum on Earth. Commander Zeth, requesting asylum on Earth. Commander Rask, requesting asylum on Earth. Within minutes, over half of the Void Talon's crew had formally defected from the Draconian Empire. They had made their choice. Humanity over conquest, friendship over domination, love over fear. Supreme Commander Drakthul stared at the displays in complete shock. This is impossible, he whispered. The humans have no mind control technology. Our intelligence reports confirm this. How have they turned my finest warriors against their own empire? They didn't turn us against anything, sir, Commander Vex said gently. They showed us what we could be if we chose to build instead of destroy, to create instead of conquer. They offered us the one thing we never knew we wanted, the chance to be valued for who we are, not what we can destroy. The communication ended abruptly as Drakthul cut the connection in rage and disbelief. On Earth, the news of the Draconian defections spread rapidly. Instead of panic or suspicion, the response was characteristically human. They threw a party. In Central Park, thousands of humans gathered to officially welcome their new neighbors. Earth's leaders had prepared a citizenship ceremony for any Draconian who wished to remain on the planet. The sight of massive reptilian warriors taking oaths of allegiance to human values while human children cheered and waved flags was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Sarah Kim stood at the podium, looking out over a crowd that included both species. Today, she said, we welcome not just new citizens, but new family members. The Draconians who have chosen to stay with us have shown incredible courage in leaving behind everything they knew to embrace a new way of life. In return, we promise to show them the same kindness and acceptance they have shown us is possible. Former Admiral Kethavar, now simply Kethavar of Earth, stepped forward to address the crowd. His voice carried easily across the park, but it was gentler than it had ever been during his military career. People of Earth, he said, my kind came here as conquerors. We expected to find a weak species that would submit to our will or be destroyed in the attempt to resist us. Instead, we found something we had never encountered before, a species that saw past our armor and weapons to the individuals beneath. You saw us not as monsters, but as people who had simply never learned a better way to live." He paused, looking out over the faces, both human and draconian, watching him. "You taught us that strength is not measured by how much you can destroy, but by how much you can build. You showed us that true power comes not from making others fear you, but from making them glad to know you. You gave us something our empire never could, the chance to be truly happy." The applause was thunderous, but it was interrupted by alarms from the orbital monitoring stations. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the emergency communication system. "All stations, we have multiple Draconian ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Confirmed, 12 Void Talon-class warships approaching fast." The crowd fell silent. Supreme Commander Drakthul had responded to the defection in the most draconian way possible, with overwhelming force. Kethvar looked up at the sky where the approaching ships would soon be visible. "It seems my former commander has decided to resolve this situation personally." Dr. Kim joined him on the platform. "How many troops will he be bringing?" "Each ship carries approximately 5,000 warriors," Kethvar replied grimly. 60,000 Draconian soldiers, led by the Supreme Commander himself. This will not be like my single ship arrival. Drakthul will not be interested in cultural exchange. What do you think he'll do? He'll demand that all defectors return immediately for execution, and he'll threaten to destroy Earth if you refuse to surrender us." Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. "And what would you recommend we do?" Kethvar looked around at the thousands of humans and Draconians standing together in the park. Human children were holding hands with Draconian warriors. Human scientists were deep in conversation with Draconian engineers. Former enemies had become family. "I recommend," he said slowly, "that we do exactly what you did when I arrived." "Which is?" "Invite them to dinner." Dr. Kim smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Within hours, Earth's response to the approaching Draconian fleet was being broadcast across all frequencies. It was Admiral Chen, but this time she was not alone. Standing beside her were Kethvar and his former officers, along with representatives of every major human nation and organization. "Supreme Commander Drakthul," Admiral Chen said, "welcome to our solar system. We understand you're here to discuss the situation with your former officers. We'd be delighted to meet with you and your crews to work out an arrangement that satisfies everyone. We've prepared landing facilities for your entire fleet, and we have accommodations ready for all 60,000 of your people. We're very much looking forward to meeting you." Kethvar stepped forward. "Supreme Commander, I know this situation is unprecedented, but I ask you to give the humans the same chance they gave us. Come down to Earth, see what we've seen, learn what we've learned, then make your decision." The transmission ended, leaving the approaching Draconian fleet to contemplate the most unusual military challenge in galactic history. How do you fight an enemy that keeps trying to be your friend? As the 12 warships drew closer to Earth, every being in the galaxy watched and waited to see what would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable act of kindness. Supreme Commander Drakthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fury, watching Earth grow larger on his displays. His massive form was encased in ceremonial battle armor that had been worn by Supreme Commanders for over 500 years. Each scale on the armor bore the mark of a conquered world, and there were thousands of them. He was the ultimate expression of Draconian power, ancient, ruthless, and absolutely convinced of his species' superiority over all others. In his 800 years of life, he had never encountered a problem that could not be solved with sufficient application of force. But as he studied the reports from Kethvar's defected crew, he found himself facing something unprecedented. Detailed descriptions of voluntary surrender to a weaker species. "Analysis," he commanded his intelligence officer. "Sir, all evidence suggests the humans possess no mind control technology, no chemical weapons that could affect our brain chemistry, and no advanced psychological warfare capabilities. By all measurements, they are a primitive species with limited and military capacity. Then explain how they turned my finest admiral and half his crew into traitors. The intelligence officer hesitated. Sir, the reports suggest they used what they call hospitality and friendship to create emotional bonds with our forces. Friendship? Drakthul's voice dripped with contempt. You're telling me that Admiral Kethvar, conqueror of 12 worlds, was defeated by friendship? That appears to be accurate, sir. Drakthul studied the tactical displays showing Earth's defenses. A few dozen primitive ships, no planetary shields, no orbital weapons platforms. He could reduce the entire planet to ash within hours. But the humans had sent that strange invitation. They wanted to work out an arrangement that satisfies everyone. They had offered to accommodate his entire fleet and all 60,000 of his warriors. No species had ever made such an offer. Most civilizations either prepared for desperate battle or sent frantic surrender messages when the Draconian Empire arrived in force. These humans were treating the arrival of 12 warships like they were planning a convention. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving another transmission from the human planet. Put it on screen. The display showed a large gathering of humans and Draconians? Drakthul leaned forward, studying the image carefully. Yes, those were definitely his former warriors, but they looked different somehow. They weren't wearing armor or carrying weapons. Instead, they appeared to be relaxed, happy. A small human female stepped forward. Supreme Commander Drakthul, I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's Director of Xenobiological Relations. Your former officers have told us so much about you. We're very excited to meet the leader of such a remarkable civilization. Drakthul's yellow eyes narrowed. This tiny creature was addressing him with the same casual friendliness that others might use to greet a neighbor. We know you must be concerned about your people, Dr. Kim continued, so we wanted you to see that they're safe and well. Why don't we let them speak for themselves? Former Admiral Kethvar appeared on screen. He looked directly at his former commander without fear or shame. Supreme Commander, I know my actions appear treasonous by traditional standards, but I need you to see what I've seen. Experience what I've experienced. The humans haven't made us weak. They've made us stronger by showing us what we could become. Other former officers appeared, each speaking briefly about their experiences on Earth. They talked about learning, growing, discovering new aspects of themselves. They spoke of human children who had adopted them as surrogate family members, of scientists who had collaborated with them as equals, of artists who had seen beauty in Draconian culture. This is impossible, Drakthul muttered. They speak as if they've been liberated rather than captured. The transmission ended with Dr. Kim's voice. Supreme Commander, we have prepared landing areas for your entire fleet in what we call New Mexico, a large open area with plenty of space for your ships. We've also arranged accommodation for all your people and prepared a cultural orientation program. We know this must all seem very strange, but we hope you'll give us a chance to show you what we've shown your officers. We believe you might find it enlightening. The screen went dark, leaving Drakthul staring at his own reflection in the black surface. Sir, his tactical officer said, we could destroy the planet from orbit. There's no need to risk exposure to whatever psychological manipulation they're using. Drakthul was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he turned to face his bridge crew. Prepare for landing. Full battle readiness. But weapons remain powered down until I give specific orders. Sir, I need to see this for myself. The landing of the Draconian fleet was the largest military operation Earth had ever witnessed. 12 massive bioships descended from orbit like falling mountains, their hulls glowing with bioluminescent patterns that had struck terror into countless worlds. They settled onto the prepared landing fields in New Mexico, their biomechanical legs extending to support structures larger than many human cities. 60,000 Draconian warriors emerged from the ships in perfect formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. They were the elite of the Empire, hand-picked by Drakthul himself for their absolute loyalty and unquestioning obedience. They were met by an even larger gathering of humans. Instead of armies or government officials, the humans had sent teachers, scientists, artists, chefs, musicians, and children. Thousands of them, carrying signs of welcome in 17 languages and holding flowers, gifts, and food. At the front of the crowd stood former Admiral Kethvar, now wearing simple human clothing instead of military armor. Beside him was Dr. Kim, looking remarkably calm for someone facing the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Supreme Commander Drakthul emerged from his flagship, towering over even his own massive warriors. His presence was intimidating enough to make the ground itself seem to tremble. This was a creature who had personally conquered 37 worlds, who had never known defeat, who was feared by entire star systems. He walked directly to where Kethvar and Dr. Kim waited. "Admiral," he said in formal Draconian, "you will order your troops to return to their ships immediately. This foolishness ends now." Kethvar looked up at his former commander without flinching. "Supreme Commander, with respect, they are no longer my troops, and I am no longer an admiral. I am simply Kethvar of Earth, and these are my friends." Drakthul's eyes flashed dangerously. "Friends? You call these creatures friends while abandoning your own species?" "I haven't abandoned my species," Kethvar replied calmly. "I've discovered what my species could become." Dr. Kim stepped forward, apparently oblivious to the danger radiating from the Supreme Commander. "Commander Drakthul. May I call you Commander? We're so honored to meet you. Kethvar and the others have told us about your incredible accomplishments, 800 years of leadership. The wisdom you must have accumulated is extraordinary." Drakthul stared down at her. This tiny creature was talking to him like he was a respected elder rather than a conquering warlord. "We've prepared a special welcome ceremony for you and your people," Dr. Kim continued. "We know you must be tired from your journey, and we want to make sure you're comfortable. We've studied Draconian dietary needs and environmental preferences, and we think you'll find our arrangements quite satisfactory." "I am not here for ceremonies," Drakthul growled. "I am here to restore order." "Of course," Dr. Kim agreed cheerfully. "But surely we can discuss the details after you've had a chance to rest and see what we've prepared. We're very curious about your perspective on leadership and governance. We'd love to learn from your experience." Behind Dr. Kim, thousands of humans waited patiently, many of them holding children who were staring at the Draconian warriors with fascination rather than fear. Some of the children were waving. Drakthul looked around at his warriors. They were maintaining formation, but he could see uncertainty in their postures. They had been trained to handle resistance, surrender, or attack. They had no protocols for handling welcome parties. "1 hour," he said finally. "I will examine your arrangements. Then we will discuss terms." Dr. Kim beamed. "Wonderful. Please follow me." What followed was the most surreal hour of Supreme Commander Drakthul's 800-year life. The humans had indeed prepared accommodations for 60,000 Draconians. They had constructed temporary housing that took into account Draconian size requirements, dietary needs, and social structures. They had prepared cultural presentations, educational programs, and recreational activities. Most disturbing of all, they had prepared questions, thousands of them. Human scientists wanted to understand Draconian biotechnology. Human historians were curious about Draconian expansion patterns and their effects on galactic civilization. Human philosophers wanted to discuss the ethics of empire and the nature of power. But it was the children who proved most devastating to Drakthul's worldview. A small human girl, no more than 6 years old, approached him while he was inspecting the accommodation facilities. She looked up at his massive, armored form without the slightest trace of fear. "Are you really 800 years old?" she asked. Drakthul looked down at her, unsure how to respond. "Yes." "Wow. You must know everything. Do you have any children?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Yes, he had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, an entire family he hadn't seen in decades because he had been too busy conquering worlds to visit them. Yes, he said slowly. "Do they miss you when you're away on trips like this?" Drakthul found himself thinking about his youngest granddaughter, who had sent him a message 2 years ago asking when he would come home to visit. He had never responded, too focused on military campaigns to spare time for family. "I think they might," he admitted quietly. The little girl smiled. "I bet they're really proud of you. My daddy travels for work sometimes, and I miss him a lot. But I'm always proud when people say nice things about him." As the hours passed, Drakthul found himself experiencing something unprecedented: doubt. Not about his military capabilities or his strategic decisions, but about the fundamental assumptions that had guided his entire life. The humans were showing him detailed plans for integrating Draconian technology with human innovation. They spoke of joint exploration missions, collaborative research projects, and cultural exchange programs. They talked about his warriors not as defeated enemies or conquered subjects, but as potential partners in building something greater than either species could achieve alone. By the end of the day, Drakthul stood alone on a hill overlooking the vast encampment where his 60,000 warriors were being entertained, educated, and welcomed by millions of humans. Many of his soldiers were deep in conversation with human counterparts. Some were participating in cultural demonstrations. Others were simply sitting quietly, listening to human music and discovering that they enjoyed it. Dr. Kim found him there, as the sun was setting. "What do you think?" she asked quietly. Drakthul was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than commanding. "In 800 years of conquest, I have taken thousands of worlds. I have accumulated vast territories, enormous wealth, and absolute power. But I have never seen my people look as content as they do right now." "What do you think that means?" Drakthul looked down at her. "I think it means I have been a very successful conqueror and a very poor leader." Dr. Kim smiled gently. "It's never too late to learn new skills." The next morning, Supreme Commander Drakthul sent a message that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. He formally dissolved the Draconian Empire, established Earth as the first interspecies collaborative territory, and requested permission to stay and learn what the humans might teach him about leadership that builds rather than destroys. Within a year, Earth had become the diplomatic center of the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together on projects that benefited everyone. The galaxy's most feared military force had become its most effective peacekeeping organization, not through conquest, but through their newfound understanding of what it meant to make others feel welcome. And somewhere in a small house in New Mexico, a former Supreme Commander sat reading bedtime stories to human children while his own granddaughter visited via hologram, finally able to see her grandfather not as a distant warlord, but as the gentle family member she had always hoped he could become. The mysterious disappearance of the Draconian ship had indeed left the galaxy speechless, not because it had vanished, but because it had shown everyone what was possible when the greatest military force in the universe learned to use its strength, to protect rather than conquer, to welcome rather than threaten, and to build bridges rather than burn them. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had conquered their conquerors with nothing more dangerous than kindness, curiosity, and the revolutionary idea that every being in the galaxy deserved to be treated like family.